Hello and welcome back to the Variant Cast. We're going to be taking a look at the Captain America Steve Rogers trilogy. We obviously just reviewed and watched the latest edition of the MCU and the Captain America franchise with Brave New World, but we're going to be taking it back to where it started here with the First Avenger, Winter Soldier, and Civil War. Kind of just giving a brief rundown, talking about what life was like when these movies came out and what these movies kind of mean to the overall cultural zeitgeist of content that the MCU has produced. So, Trent, we're going to be starting with Captain America, the First Avenger. You know, before the MCU was a content machine, before multiverse and every superhero movie being set up for the next one, there was Captain America First Avenger, another movie that was trying to set up for the next one, as they had lofty ambitions, and they did a pretty good job with this one. I wouldn't say it is a perfect film, but it lays the groundwork for not only the MCU, but Steve Rogers as a character who went on to be one of the most beloved characters in all of media. What do you think about this film when you picture watching this? What do you picture, and what does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, me when I think of this movie, I think of that iconic shot of Captain America standing there with the trash can, standing there with his first shield. I think of barefoot Captain America running through the streets after he gets his powers for the first time. Um, I think that there's a lot of innocence in that movie. I feel like that I really like a lot, and a lot of, like you said, just groundwork that is built upon over the next like few phases of the MCU that I think really helps it not only still last or still have rewatchability to it, but also uh, has like some just a good bit of MCU lore.
Yeah, I think, and I guess to start off, you can't talk about this movie without talking about Chris Evans, obviously. And Chris Evans is a perfect cast. I think I would be interested to see an alternate reality where Chris Evans is, Superman, and we get kind of a similar rendition to what he did here, because it is kind of a perfect Superman as well. He's humble and good-hearted and innocent, naive, all the stuff that you would want from Captain America, and he has to, earn his powers, uh, have a pretty small arc in the beginning, but that then is expanded upon as it goes through. He deals with, getting jacked and getting attention from people that never even looked at him. I think the scrawny Steve Rogers is probably the thing I think of when I think of this movie, how well it's done. When you're watching it, when I watched it for the first time, it wasn't jarring, and it still isn't. We don't see this much, a character being scrawnified and made into small dude. That's not something that happens very much, but it's done really well here. It doesn't look unnatural or any uncanny valley type of thing. And this is just a classic war movie, really, that they decided to be like, boom, war movie with a little bit of comic books. And that's what this is. And there's some faults with that, but I think, what it does really good is really in the first half of the movie. I think you probably could turn it off after the first half and then watch Winter Soldier and Civil War and still get a good understanding. Um, Mainly because this first half is just so packed with like character building, so packed with how to, how his morals work, how he feels about his friends and his comrades and everything, that you really don't need the second half. But unfortunately, movies do require a second half to, be theatrical and all that stuff. And I think that's where this movie does fall off, if there is any point. That's just Red Skull doesn't really need to be there in my opinion. I understand you have to set up Hydra, but can't the villain just be, the Nazis? I guess that might be a bit too political these days. Nazis are bad, but you can't say that or else people think you're bigoted, I guess. I don't know, man.
Yeah, but at the same time, Red Skull was just like the representation of the Nazis in the MCU.
He was, yeah.
So
But he also had this weird cube, and that's, setting up for later. I don't know if they always expected the Tesseract to be the Space Stone, is what it ended up being, I believe. I don't know if that was always the plan or it was going to be a cosmic cube. I don't remember exactly how that went down, but it gets very comic booky, like I said, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that Red Skull, he's menacing. His face, I really like the makeup and effects that they do with him peeling off his face. I think that still looks really, really good. I just think he's a little forgettable in terms of maybe it's the writing. I can't really remember a line that he said. Maybe that's my fault. You constantly hear things from other Marvel villains quoted all the time, whether that be about Tony Stark building something in a cave or the Loki lines from the first Avenger. I just think this one falls a little flat in the villain writing department, but I do think you have a good point there that he is kind of the personification of Nazis, so you don't really have to make the audience dislike him any more than that. He's a Nazi.
yeah, exactly. And I like what you said about, it's straight to the point. It's a straight war movie, but at the same time, uh, I feel like it has a good amount of like campiness to it that fits into the time period piece that it's set in, and just the just the overall like war style movie. I think that Tommy Lee Jones is great as the sergeant, or as the military sergeant, and I think that Haley Atwell is obviously great as Peggy Carter, and I think that yeah, like you said, this is just a solid start of a not only just the Marvel universe, but a great start to the trilogy with just a great cast of characters that are both connected to Cap and that'll carry on through the next couple movies.
Yeah, and I think what this does really well is it introduces a lot of connective tissue to other MCU projects without making it super noticeable. Like the Howard Stark stuff feels very in line with the rest of the movie. It doesn't feel like you're departing and talking about Iron Man. It's you're still in a Captain America movie. It embraces a lot of the old school charm. It's a good period piece, and it nails the character. I think it feels very much like a complete movie. It has those third act issues, and it has a lot of montages. This is a montage heavy second act. Um, but overall, it's a well done. I think this one is rewatchable because there's a lot of interesting set designs, especially if you are a history buff and you care about the World War II time period. I'm on record saying that maybe we should be exploring some other time periods. That World War II might be a bit more overdone, but I think it makes sense, especially with this character, that you would go back to World War II. And think it really good job. It's probably one of the better first movies in terms of like when you compare it to the first Thor or something like that. But it's not pinnacle. It's not peak. I would probably give it like a 7 out of 10 on a scale there. It is enjoyable though.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And unlike Thor, where you could kind of see his progression through like each movie, where each movie he has a little bit of a different personality. Like Chris Evans is the same Captain America in Endgame as we saw in the first Avenger, and so I think that that's just a really solid testament to uh, the storytelling of the first movie and Chris Evans' personification of the character. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that it's one of the better starts of a character's trilogies.
And I think that's a great point. Is most character arcs, a traditional character arc is, going through and generally you see changes with the character, but the sequels like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, it's more about trying to tear down Captain America, trying to tear down his values and change him in a negative light. And his resolve is kind of what makes that interesting. So, uh, while the first Avenger was a solid wartime adventure, the Winter Soldier is where Marvel was like, "Hey, let's try some different genres." And I think this one is it's almost mocked at this point to call this a political thriller or a spy thriller. But that is what it is. It's what it's trying to be, and I think it does a good job at that. And I think that this is where Marvel was really cooking, is they essentially took a character like Captain America, they took a genre like spy thriller, and they wrote a script to make that make sense, as opposed to trying to fit it into the universe and then coming up with a script after they fit it into the universe, which I feel like is more what they do now. Chris Evans' Cap is the absolute best here. I think uh, Civil War, he's also really good, but I think that this is the peak of Chris Evans' Cap. He's right out of the 1940s, and you get to see his ideals from the 1940s clash with the modern world. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing when you're talking about a man at a time. Like, how is he going to react to the modern world? And they do a really good job with that in this movie. You see scenes early on where they're talking about he has like a list of things that he's trying to catch up on. And it's very wholesome. They went ahead and actually changed that list in different countries to make it more in line with, what people of those countries know about, which I think is a really cute touch. And overall, this film is just really well made. You could tell a lot of care went into it. And I don't know what studio interference was like at this time, but I would say that this is pretty clean in terms of that. I don't know. Obviously, maybe Marvel was interfering and they were just really good at it back then. But this one feels like there was a vision, and that vision was able to be executed.
Yeah, I think that this was around the time of Guardians of the Galaxy, uh, Iron Man 3, where they started to develop Ant-Man. So I feel like this was kind of the era where Marvel was maybe letting loose a little bit with their IPs, so to say, like kind of uh, give them a little bit more unrestricted like storytelling and stuff like that. So I think that's probably definitely a contributing factor to why this movie still feels so fresh when you watch it, and why it's so still so like coveted as like one of the better MCU movies is because of like that change of style and like placing those characters in a style like that, and the fact that it actually worked is something that I feel like the MCU's been trying to emulate ever since.
Yeah, and I think this one is kind of silenced people on the Marvel has no good villains, because you do get Bucky, and Bucky is so good in this movie. The conflict between characters, and also just the Hydra of it all. Those two aspects working together really, really well. I have no complaints here when it comes to the villain. I think that because all of the villains and the twist, they feel realistic, I think that also lends well to the action that we get in this film. It's not over the top, but it is really, really well done and choreographed. There's a scene with George St. Pierre, the former UFC champion. He plays the Leaper, or what? Do you
The
remember his full name?
Batroc the Leaper.
Yeah, I knew you would. uh, that's one of my favorite fight scenes in the entire MCU, and there's a lot of really, really good ones, really good action scenes in this movie. If you have not seen this movie, it is worth it if you are a fan of action, even if you don't like superheroes. This isn't a big superhero movie. This is more of an action thriller, pretty much through and through. While the last one was, hey, what if World War II had a superhero? This one is very much just hey, what if a super soldier had to deal with a political uprising of, you know, evil secret Nazi agents of some kind.
Yeah, I think that yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. I also think that, Sam Jackson is great in this movie. The supporting cast is just phenomenal. Robert Redford as the head of Hydra. I think he's a great like human, like I guess, yeah, like human villain. So not very like not any superpowers or anything. I think that he's a great character for that movie. And I think that like I said before, like even though Chris Evans is like the same character throughout, you can still see like the values and the characteristics of that same Captain America. He still does go through like a growth of like in this movie, and I think that uh, this movie out of the three Cap movies, he probably has the best growth.
It also lays seeds for his distrust in government because in the first one he's a willing soldier, and this is really the first thing that tests how naive he is.
Yeah.
And he has to, learn the true villain was trusting people, and that is really, really shown when we get to the next film. As it's while I do just want to say I think Winter Soldier was kind of the first movie in the MCU because at this time we were starting to coin the term like, oh, it's a good Marvel movie. Oh, that's a good Marvel movie. But this was the first one people started like pushing back and saying this isn't just a good Marvel movie. It's a good movie, period. And I think that's a phrase that was then repeated as we, got, like you said, the Guardians films and uh, a multitude of other good films from the studio. But this was really the first where it's like, hey, this studio can make good films. And I think a big part of that was having a bit more complex of a character like Steve Rogers that was able to then take his distrust from the government and then set up the seeds for a civil war, which is where we go next with Captain America Civil War, the most passive aggressive Avengers movie that's not an Avengers movie. This is something because this was the thing that got me to watch Marvel movies because I don't know, I wasn't into them, and then I heard Spider-Man was going to be in it, so I went ahead and watched every Marvel movie because of that. And I don't know if I'm better for it, but I'm here. I wouldn't be here without this movie, and it's kind of like an Avengers 2.5. I don't know. At the same time, this is kind of the most true Avengers movie where we actually get the Avengers like being the Avengers, talking to each other, having conflicts about being the Avengers.
Yeah.
So while it's not an Avengers movie, it's also the most Avengers movie. But it is a Captain America movie. And they do continue his character arc of his distrust with government as we have the Sokovia Accords, that is the central conflict of the film, and how they separate Iron Man and Cap onto two different sides of people that are willing to sign those and people that aren't willing to. Cap obviously being the latter. How do you feel about this movie now? Because at the time it was very easy to get caught up in, oh, there's all this stuff happening. Look, it's Black Panther. But now we sit here almost 10 years later. more like 8, 7, something like that. Uh, half a decade, something. How do you feel?
I still think I still enjoy it when I rewatch it. I still have a good time. I still feel like I find still find things that I may not have noticed or may have forgotten. But I still think that the movie holds up. I think that part of that is Cap's through line. I think that if it was an Avengers movie, I don't know if I would have the same opinion on it of like uh I still the rewatchability and me appreciating it still as much because I feel like Cap's story in that is really what is the purpose of the story without the through line of Bucky. And I guess like you could have added Bucky into an Avengers movie and had that same plot in an Avengers movie, but I don't think that it would hold. I don't think that it would hold as much weight. I think that the inclusion of Peggy in this movie would feel kind of weird if it was an Avengers movie. So I think that just a combination of things, I kind of appreciate that it's a Captain America movie, even if I didn't really at the time. And I think that it's still like I said, I think it still holds up, but I do think that it's probably one of or probably the least rewatchable out of the three of them.
Yeah, I think the parts that do make it rewatchable, like you're saying, is the Captain America scenes, and just kind of like piecing those together. I don't love the subplot with Sharon Carter. I think Marvel doesn't love that anymore either. I think they wish they could go back and change that. I don't know why they felt like he needed a love interest and why that love interest needed to be um, Peggy Carter's niece. I don't know. Just strange. Don't love it. And those are the parts that I wish we could, not have.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is a lot of good. I think Baron Zemo is actually one of the better parts of this film. And I think that might be a hot take because a lot of people think his plan makes zero sense. And yeah, it does have a lot of conveniences and he gets very lucky. And I think that should have been maybe touched on a little bit. But I think he's at least intriguing and he's kind of like just a guy, and I think that's a fun character to have, just a guy kind of destroying the Avengers. I don't know if I like the way this film ends. It doesn't feel too bloated to me in terms of introducing all these different characters. I think it pulls that off pretty well. I just don't. I don't know. I don't think that they should have beat Iron Man. I think this would have been better if after revealing that, he killed his mom, Iron Man like absolutely goes postal and destroys both Cap and Bucky, and he has Cap on the ropes and Cap hits him with a classic I could do this all day, but he doesn't win. And I think Iron Man should just leave because he's not an evil dude and he doesn't want to kill Cap, but he could have. I don't know. I just don't think it's believable that Cap and Bucky would be able to go toe to toe with Iron Man. That's just my take. And I think maybe it would have been a bit more intriguing of an ending. But I think overall, the way this film ends, it does set up Avengers Infinity War very well. And this is very much a lead-in film to that. So it does that very, very, very well. I just don't know if the entire story makes sense when you take a step back. I wouldn't say it's a bad film, though. I think I still like it more than First Avenger just because of, Black Panther is very interesting in it. Spider-Man's pretty well portrayed in it. There's so much going on, and it doesn't lose its narrative. It somehow, will come back to it and still make sense. I think for how much they were trying to juggle, it's very well done, but it's not necessarily traditionally well done. If we're going to say that Winter Soldier is not just a great Marvel movie, it's a great movie. This is not a great movie, but it is a great Marvel movie. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree. I agree with you, but also I think that I like you said, it's an Avengers. It's an Avengers movie. That's not an Avengers movie, and for that, I feel like I automatically kind of put it higher on my list. But taking a step back and looking at the trilogy, I think I would put. I think I would put probably. I think I probably would put it second after Winter Soldier, and then probably put the First Avenger last. But I do think it's a really solid trilogy, and even though the movies take place like on way different parts of the timeline, I think that it does have a solid through line and a solid cast of characters that I think support the need for a trilogy and kind of like an ending of the trilogy like Civil War has. And I think that as far as Marvel trilogies go, it's one of the better ones.
In terms of just pure consistency, because Thor, it goes and then and then Iron Man, it's a little squiggly, but this is just consistent good films. And if you're gonna like watch one trilogy from Marvel, I think that this is kind of the one. Obviously, Iron Man has its benefits, but I don't think that the Iron Man trilogy works without watching Avengers. I think you kind of need Avengers to enjoy the Iron Man trilogy, especially 3, because he deals with like a ton of PTSD from Avengers. So when it comes to a standalone trilogy, you could watch these 3 films without watching anything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and still understand it and get a good idea of Cap's character. And he has a fulfilling arc throughout the whole thing. But, it's not that. It's in the MCU, and it does a good job of being in the MCU, maybe the best job of any trilogy. It had multiple directors, and they all were able to kind of fit in with what the overall vision for Captain America was by Kevin Feige and the higher ups. And I think that was a solid vision, and I would watch it again.
Same. And I will.
But thank you for taking a trip down memory lane with us, going through these Captain America films. If you guys want us to take a look at any other set of films, we've been thinking about, Dark Knight for a while. We might do another Marvel one maybe later, as we get closer to, I don't know, Thunderbolts or something. Who knows? But if you have any recommendations, whether that be Paddington or Saw, I don't really care. Just go ahead and throw those in the comments, and we will see you guys next time.
Deuces.